There has been a murder in the Scarlet Mansion. Miss Scarlet has been murdered in her own ballroom. When the detectives get to the house, they immediately find the murder weapon, a dagger, and send it into forensics for a DNA fingerprint analysis. Upon further questioning, they realize that Mrs. Scarlet's best friend, Mrs. Peacock, was at the house just minutes before the murder occurred. They bring her in for some questions, and she says that she witnessed someone entering the house when she was leaving, but she didn't think anything of it because Scarlet had people over at her house frequently. The detectives then stop by the forensic analysis unit to check in on the dagger that they were able to obtain. The scientist explains that a strand of hair was found on the weapon. They then got the DNA from the hair and amplified it using PCR. Then they used gel electrophoresis to separate the DNA. Here's the witness and the four suspects: Mrs. Peacock, Mr. Green, Colonel Mustard, Dr. Orchid, and Professor Plum. Each of these suspects has bad blood with Miss Scarlet and could have had a reason to murder her. Here is the gel from the DNA from all four suspects and the witness. This gel has 2 VNTR loci. The first column is the DNA from the hair found on the dagger. Now let's look at each individual separately for the first locus. To start off with Mrs. Peacock, you can see that her bands match the bands for the hair, so she is still a possible suspect. Same for Mr. Green, his bands also match the bands on the hair, so he is also a possible suspect. Colonel Mustard, however, his bands do not match the hair bands, and therefore he is no longer a suspect in this case. Dr. Orchid also does not have bands that match with the hair, so she is not a suspect in this case. And Professor Plum, his bands do match with the hair, so he is still a suspect in this case. Now let's take a look at VNTR loci 2. Again, here's the hair. Now, since we've already ruled out Colonel Mustard and Dr. Orchid, we do not have to look at their bands because we already know that they are no longer suspects. So let's start off with Mrs. Peacock. Her bands do not match the hair bands, and therefore she is no longer a suspect in this case. Mr. Green, however, his bands do match with the bands on the hair on the second locus, which means that he is most likely the murderer. Just to be sure, though, let's check Professor Plum, and his bands are not similar to the bands on the hair. So therefore, we can conclude that Mr. Green is the murderer in this case. In addition to finding the murderer as Mr. Green, the scientists also found something very interesting. Dr. Orchid and Professor Plum both have common bands in loci 1 and loci 2, which means that Professor Plum is actually Dr. Orchid's father. Once the detectives crack the case, they tell the police, and the police arrest Mr. Green and he goes to jail. Next, the detectives are on to their next case.